good afternoon, everyone. I am Lorraine, and as Prof. Angie has introduced, I'm actually a third-year student in the National University of Singapore, and I've also taken up 2 minors, one in aquatic ecology and another in geoscience. So before I start off, I was hoping to give everyone a background of myself. So I'm actually my family's firstborn, so I'm the oldest, and I have 2 younger sisters with me. And okay, so from here, I'm gonna start letting everyone know how come I was actually growing up with so much fear in my childhood growing up process. Okay, so starting off with childhood, I was actually before I started primary school, I was pretty much growing up with my grandparents instead of my parents. So from what I can recall, there weren't much tensions or unhappiness between me and my parents. But as I entered primary school, my parents started giving me more and more pressure, especially from my father. And I felt that the pressure started kicking in was because PSLE was part of, primary school. And grades became everything my father sees, but they were actually not that worrying until I reached primary 5. So in P5, I actually had my results started to become not so desirable, and it gained a lot of attention from my dad, and he became very, very harsh on me. And that's when a lot of trips to popular bookstore for assessment books started. And my father also started to become in very close contact with my teachers. And because of that, he also forced me to start reading the Straits Times daily, which was something that I was very reluctant in complying, because at P5, I really did not enjoy all the things that I was told to do. So as a child, I started to dislike my father to the extent where I would rather grow up in an environment without his expectations. So basically, at the age, I just wanted to go out without him by my side. So I started to communicate a lot more with my mother, which sort of resulted in more arguments between my parents, because my mom became the middleman. So, as a child, you hear your parents argue, or just anyone in the household arguing, is just really so unpleasant. So to really, decrease the number of times that I hear these unpleasant arguments, I decided to follow whatever my father expected of me. Yet sometimes it's just really very difficult to please him. So even though sometimes I show improvement in my results, it just seemed like it was never enough to him. Therefore, even though on one hand, I really wanted to continue showing improvement, I also wanted to enjoy my life as a primary school kid. So I do have my rebellious phases where I just did not want to heed the advice of my father. And this is where the cane came in, which can be seen in this picture here. So growing up in fear, which is the title of my sharing, this is the fear that I have. Everyone experiences many different kinds of pain, but the pain a cane brings me, it still haunts me even at this age when I'm 21 years old. So one of my most vivid memories is actually me crying under the piano at home, and I was actually feeling very helpless, and nobody came to my rescue, and I was actually sobbing hysterically while my father was holding the cane at me the whole time. So every time I see a cane when I was growing up, even till now, whether it's directed at me or not, or my sisters, I will still flinch, and fear will start growing in me. So whenever I had to set goals for the subjects that I was taking, I set goals that were very far-fetched, but they were actually goals that would make my father happy, even though they're rather unattainable for myself. So whenever I do not meet these goals, when my results are not up to par, I will actually panic, and 1001 scenarios will just replay in my head, on how my father would react to my results. So from what I can recall, it was whenever I receive these results, it's mostly my father demanding reasons for my performance, and it's just me unable to give him an answer that satisfied him. And this actually went on all the way to junior college, where the expectations from my father actually it got less intense, and I was really pressurized by him. But our relationship was still in need of repair, and even though there were definitely improvements from before. But what I wanted to focus here was really the pressure and the habit that I was sort of trained to have, of setting unattainable or ridiculously high expectations for myself. So this mentality of setting expectations has been ingrained in me throughout secondary school, JC, and even till now in university. And now, instead of my father, I became my own pressure. So the effects of my ridiculously high expectations was actually apparent back in A-levels. It's just one of the few episodes that I can remember. So actually, I was struggling a lot during the 2 years of JC, and I struggled a lot to get my studies back up just in time for A-levels. And thinking that I've given my best, I settled for the goals of getting a few A's and then maybe a few B's. But just some context about myself, even till prelims, my grades were still at like D or even below D. So when I received my A-level results, they were actually far from the goals that I've set. And as you can see, they are really, really far from the goals that I've set. And it's really a really bad habit that I had. So when I received those results, I actually cried and I panicked a lot. But I have also another episode and a memory, which was quite recent. So it was back in the semester 2 of my first year in university. So results were not actually the only thing that I failed to hit. I was also in many other commitments, and I did not perform up to par in them. So during that period, I really spiraled downwards so badly. I remember my chest getting really tight and my breathing becomes so labored that sometimes it takes me a few days to really gain back my composure. And even if I do, when I stop spiraling with all the different kinds of thoughts that I have, I will still be in such low spirits. And it's really very different from how I felt like I was before. So I realized that results, be it studies or just all kinds of commitments that I have that do not hit my expectations, they really hit me really hard. And how I wish that I was introduced to the practice of mindfulness back then, because I realized that I really could not tolerate and I did not know how to tackle failure. And this habit really followed me everywhere, even when I realized I was trying to perform acts of kindness. But at that point, I was actually performing acts of kindness with expectations that the people that I'm showing kindness to will actually reciprocate back. And because of this, I became very fixated on how people view me. And I always wanted to please people and did not want people to have a bad impression of myself. But I'm thankful that when I was going through this struggle, I actually encountered mindfulness. And I will continue to share how this practice has actually improved my life. So from here on, it's just me improving. So firstly is what changed between me and my father. So for the problems with my father, as I've mentioned, the pressure that he gave me actually decreased as I started growing older, but our relationship was still kind of rocky. So in the Undefeated Mind module, we were actually taught the 9 foundational attitudes, and there were a few that I practiced in order to bridge the gap between my father and I. Firstly, I held gratitude really close because I started to realize how hard he actually works for the family, and I should be more appreciative, for the efforts that he tries his best as a parent to put in. And another value or sort of practice that I practiced was actually mindful speaking. So this mindful speaking actually taught me that, whenever my father says something that's very unpleasant to me, I should not respond with my own share of hurtful words. Instead, I learned that I should take 3 deep breaths and I would go on with these 3 different methods. So firstly is I would simply acknowledge the whatever he told me. If not, sometimes I would instead of saying something nasty, I would phrase my response appropriately, and it would not cause a fight between us. Yeah, and lastly, I would even correct his way of speaking, because I felt at the end of the day, I might be his daughter and he might be my father, but we should still show mutual respect to each other. So these situations, I actually saw an improvement in our relationship, especially during the circuit breaker period, where we have to spend an extended amount of time together at home. So there was actually more communication between both of us, and which resulted in more understanding, and there were actually lesser feelings of dislike towards my father and more gratitude. And even though there are these improvements, but I still feel that our relationship is still in the works, because sometimes it's still a struggle to get my word across, but it's better than before. So next would be how I changed in terms of managing expectations at my studies. So my expectations for myself has actually caused a lot of anxiety and sometimes even regret. So in this aspect, I actually applied the values of kindness, acceptance, letting go, and trust. I learned what it is to be kinder to myself, knowing my own capabilities and settling for more realistic goals. So it definitely takes time, but I start to trust myself when I tell myself that I've done the very best that I could. Acceptance also comes in when I know that I've done the very best that I can in my assignments and examinations, and knowing that I cannot change anything after I submit them. So I have changed from someone who would always go around checking my answers after the paper to one that really pats myself on the back for doing my very best. And it's been a journey. And I was actually able to see a change in myself 2 semesters ago, when my results were not exactly what I expected. But at that moment, when I saw those results, there were no moments where I was beating myself up or I was feeling very tensed up. And, I just sort of recall back to a moment where if I saw how it's been without practicing mindfulness, it's been so different. And I became so thankful that I was able to encounter this practice. And it is like I started living in the present, and there isn't a part of my past that I wanted to change or I regretted. So lastly, when it came to managing my expectations with my friends, so I was actually never a reflective person. I just didn't like to look back on my day, but mindfulness has really taught me that it's important to reflect on myself, so that it really allows me to have a better understanding of my actions and my emotions. It has been a tough time trying to understand that, being genuinely generous is not easy, but the process of realization has made me happier. And especially during this pandemic, I've been writing letters to my friends that I was unable to meet up. And I did it with the intention of wanting them to feel warmth, even though we're not, going through this together physically. So I did it without wanting any sort of validation, reciprocation of expectations from them. And it felt really great because I was not doing it to keep an image of myself, but I just wanted to be a friend to them. So as I conclude my sharing, I'm very thankful to have encountered this practice of mindfulness. And this practice, my practice of mindfulness has really allowed me to tackle these episodes of struggles and allowed my life to change for the better. So I will end my sharing here. Thank you everyone for listening.